On the wedding day, he left me alone at the venue and disappeared. I was 4 months pregnant, calling him many times. At first, he didn't answer, then he turned off his phone. People around started whispering, "Groom ran away on the first sight." Those who rush into marriage without modesty, even if they don't want them, it serves them right. I stood in the wind, at a loss, trying to calm down the guests who were leaving one after another. All day long, I foolishly waited on the street corner, until everyone had left clean and he still didn't show up. An aunt beside me casually said, "Jason looks like the son of your father's ex-wife. Maybe he's here to take revenge on you." On the way back, those words echoed in my mind. In a daze, my car collided with a truck, and I and my 4-month-old baby were buried under the car. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to 3 months ago, the day I found out I was pregnant. I squeezed the pregnancy test, sitting on the toilet for a long time. A beam of light shone in through the slightly open window, the 2 bars on it bright and conspicuous. Each drop of water in the bathroom hit my heart, painful and suffocating. The pain from the past life had not dissipated. Jason's voice came from outside the door. "What's wrong?" His usual concise tone. Just half an hour ago, I was still standing at the wedding scene, praying for his appearance countless times. On that day in the previous life, he had just come back from work, bringing my favorite bread. I rushed out excitedly to hug him, showing him the pregnancy test. Jason's expression at that time was complicated, staring at it for a long time, holding it. "Are you sure?" Joy lingered in my heart. I felt like being splashed with cold water, restrained my smile carefully and asked, "You don't want this?" "No." He pursed his lips, looked at me deeply. "We're not married yet. Can we do it now?" After a moment of consideration, Jason said, "Yes." After 5 years, Jason and I finally entered the realm of marriage, but remembering the embarrassment and helplessness I felt at my own wedding in the past life, amidst the whispers and finger-pointing of the crowd, awkwardly clutching a cell phone, praying for his appearance to rescue me from the predicament, made me feel breathless. Before my dad married my mom, he had a wife. I didn't know about their past, but from the day Jason met me, was he planning to push me into an abyss? When Jason came in, I was pale, huddled in the corner. In the trash can, wrapped in it, was the pregnancy test I concealed. His tall figure blocked the light, squatting in front of me, his handsome eyebrows slightly frowned. "Feeling unwell?" He smelled dusty. I knew he was busy, sometimes too busy to attend to me. At the beginning of our relationship, he was attentive to me, and I could lean on his love recklessly. But I don't know when it started changing. Sharp eyebrows, charming eyes. But there was darkness in his eyes, difficult to understand. Even when he looked at me gently, it seemed as if he was hiding a load. He gradually restrained my temper, no longer demanding him to do things for me. He loved me, but somehow, this love seemed to be mixed with something else, making me more and more cautious, afraid to touch it. When he looked at me like that, had he already thought that 4 months later, I would be a part of his revenge plan? Lying on the cold operating table, enduring the pain? The 4-month-old baby has formed a placenta, and can only be stripped alive from the mother's body. What did my dad do to him that was so wrong, that he wanted to be so cruelly vengeful on me? Perhaps the memories of the past life were too unbearable. This time, I didn't tell him about the pregnancy. I buried my head in my arms. After a long time, I whispered, "It's okay, just upset stomach, lie down for a while." Jason's hand paused, gently resting on my head, and lightly pinched my earlobe. His voice, like his fingertips, didn't carry much warmth. "Okay." After 5 years of being together, Jason once said that I was his destiny. One winter, city rarely snowed for half a month, Jason waited for me at the subway entrance every evening wearing a black wool coat to pick me up after work. Then he would hold my hand, walk under the dim street lights, and the lights in the distance were on at home. Jason didn't like the snow, but he said, "Because Bonnie likes it, so I'm trying to like it too." But when did he start to change? Jason gradually became very busy, sometimes not at home for 3 to 5 days, and even more outrageously, he would disappear for a while, almost not replying to messages. However, every time he came back, he turned back into the kind and caring him. There was hot food on the table, and clothes were cleaned. As if he was compensating for something. The bedroom door was opened, pulling me out of the memories of the previous life. Standing at the door, Jason said, "Bonnie, I'm going to the office." It's the office again. Jason forgot, today is my birthday. In the past life, I reminded him unwillingly to come back early to celebrate my birthday, and Jason promised. I waited eagerly the whole night. The candle burned into the cake, leaving 20 black little holes. Mocking my pitifulness and ignorance. Since he was destined not to come back, why did he promise in the first place? This time, I didn't want to ask him to celebrate my birthday anymore. After a long silence, I suppressed the emotions and said quietly, "Okay." There was no movement behind me. I remembered, every time before he left, I had to give him a kiss. Was he waiting for this? I curled up in the covers again, to warm myself a bit, and softly said, "I'm not feeling well, I'm going to sleep." "All right." Jason never forced me. With a click, he closed the door. The sound of a car driving away came from downstairs. The inside of the room returned to the deadly silence. I mustered up the strength, minutes later, got up, got dressed, and went out the door. In these years, I knew nothing about Jason. He had a company but never let me visit, nor did he mention meeting his parents. If it weren't for that aunt at the wedding in my past life blurting out, I wouldn't even know that I was being kept in the dark and played for a fool. 5 years had made me too dependent on him. This time, I wanted to break that dependency myself. The autumn wind was strong, whistling, messing up my hair. I hailed a cab on the side of the road, gave the address. "Miss, why are you going to the old street alone?" I mustered a forced smile and said, "To pick up my love after work." It was Jason's company address, something I coincidentally saw in Jason's phone in my past life. Otherwise, he wouldn't even tell me where his company was located. During that time, he would frequently disappear, often gone for 3 to 4 days. He thought it was because of the early stages of his business, too busy. Was that really the case? I held onto my handbag tightly, blood rushing in my ears, thumping. The car slowly stopped by the side of the road, headlights on. The driver lit a cigarette. "Miss, are you sure this is it?" It wasn't an office building but an apartment. The gray sky loomed over the apartment building, the woodome tree in front swaying in the autumn wind, a subtle gloominess. The car's heater was on. I sat in the car, watching Jason and another woman emerge from the alley, through the glass. A sharp feeling of detachment spread through me, tearing at my soul, making all those years of waiting and hoping seem incredibly pathetic and worthless. The woman was young, slender, wearing Jason's scarf, her eyes bright and captivating when she laughed. Jason said he liked the dimples when I smiled. She had them too. She carried fresh fruits and vegetables and Jason's favorite beer. Jason had his hands in his pockets, a stylish purse draped over his arm, trailing behind her leisurely. In an indulgent and affectionate manner, he looked at her walking lightly in his sight, filled with her everywhere. They chatted and laughed all the way into the building. At the moment they entered, she turned around, pushed him against the wall, on tiptoe. A gust of wind blew, and the slightly ajar security door blocked my view. I could only see her red high heels swaying merrily. The car's hazard lights were still on, clicking away. The driver flicked his cigarette ash. "Forget it, leave early." I clenched my hand tightly, then suddenly opened the car door and rushed out. "Jason! You jerk!" My voice was drowned out by the noisy honking. I stumbled and fell over a manhole, crashing into a pile of dirty fallen leaves, scraping my skin. After the car drove away, the barren road was empty. The security door was blown askew by the wind. The people who were standing there had disappeared without a trace. It felt like I had been slapped hard. It hurt and rang. Finally, the driver helped me back into the car. He sighed. "Arguing is useless. When it rains, a mother gets married. Hearts are fickle, can't control them." On my birthday that year, I turned the house upside down, including Jason's study and bedroom. I frantically searched for evidence of his affair. In the wee hours of the morning, I sat on the floor, clutching my aching stomach, curled up in a ball. Clean. Not only was there no evidence of an affair, but even the traces of his own life had been wiped clean. The computer had no password, like a new machine, with no search history. I had seen Jason sit in front of the computer countless times, working, so why did he delete everything? The toothbrush, socks, underwear I bought for him were neatly arranged. In a hidden corner of the study, I saw the gifts I had given to Jason over the years. Most remained unopened. It seemed like he deliberately erased any evidence of my existence around him that could create a warm and happy illusion over the years, suddenly shattered like a bubble he pretended to love me. Behind my back, he became a family with another woman. Was it really true? I lay in bed, the doctor pressing the cold probe on my belly. It had only been a month. Soon I would be able to hear the fetal heartbeat. The day I found out I was pregnant in the past life, Jason was with me. I chattered on, but he stared at the ultrasound report for a long time, smiling, saying, "Can you really see anything the size of a soybean?" I thought he didn't like children, but later, listening to the fetal heartbeat on my belly became his daily habit. The reality and memories were so contradictory. I couldn't convince myself that Jason had never loved me, nor could I firmly believe that Jason did love me. The doctor handed me the completed report, just like in the past life, too small, couldn't see anything. "If you don't want it, tell the doctor over there, let her give you a termination form." As I was leaving, she added, "Remember to bring the father of the child next time, pregnancy is not one person's responsibility." I thanked the doctor, walking down the corridor. The sunset's glow shone in, and I stared at the report for a long time. Suddenly, someone bumped into me, and the report scattered all over the floor. As I squatted down to help her pick things up, I accidentally saw the medical records, "Not recommended for pregnancy in the short term." I froze when I looked up again. It was the woman who was with Jason. "Thank you," she hurriedly said, looking a bit pale as if she had been crying. She didn't even glance at me when she left. I had read a lot of posts before about couples who couldn't have children, trying every possible way to have their own. This speculation wasn't absurd. I don't know how I walked out of the hospital. Standing by the roadside, Jason's phone rang. "Bonnie, you're not home." With a stuffy nose from a cold, I replied, "I'm at the hospital to get some medicine. Where are you?" Hearing his concerned voice made me feel even more suffocated, as if I was wrapped in a cocoon I couldn't break free from. I took a deep breath and said, "It's okay, I'm almost home. Wait for me." I sat on a stone pillar outside the hospital for a long time until I felt frozen, then flagged down a car on the roadside to go home. The autumn sky darkened early. When I reached the bottom of the building, I saw Jason holding a coat, waiting for me downstairs. Next to him was that woman. My feet suddenly stopped, my heart feeling like it had been torn open a bit, aching. When Jason saw me, his expression softened. He walked towards me and wrapped me in that familiar woolen scarf. "This is my partner, Christina," he introduced. I don't know if it was a delusion, but I could smell the woman's perfume on the scarf. Christina reached out her hand. "Hello, I'm..." A wave of nausea surged from my stomach, and I knelt by the flower bed, retching in that moment. I wanted to scream for Christina and Jason to leave. Christina looked at me on the side. Jason crouched beside me, patting my back and opening a bottle of water, asking, "Still not feeling well?" His gentle touch, enough to deceive many girls with its utmost tenderness. You could see his eyes were filled with me. I straightened up and abruptly took off the scarf and handed it to him. "I don't like scarves." Jason's hand hesitated, then carefully folded the scarf, turned around, and crouched in front of me. "Okay, I'll carry you upstairs." I had no strength left, so I weakly lay against his back. Jason's footsteps were steady, his breath blowing in my ear. In the past, I used to love the feeling of him carrying me on his back. 2 or 3 years ago, I would happily lie on his back, urging him to walk faster. Jason would smile and say, "Bonnie, I can't walk too fast like this." Thinking about it now, those were distant memories now, there was only resistance. Christina followed behind, and several times, I caught her staring at me out of the corner of my eye. That look, as if she saw me as a bargaining chip. I thought, should leave. The lights were on at home. There was food on the table, with a delicate little cake in the center. Jason opened the candle packaging and put in 24 candles. I wasn't with you yesterday, Bonnie, so I'm making it up to you today. Because of Christina's arrival, I couldn't say a word. She sat opposite, smiling at me. I heard it's your birthday today. Can you drink? I shook my head. She raised her glass with some regret and said lightly, Happy birthday. I suddenly felt a bit ironic. What right did she have to wish me a happy birthday after spending the night with Jason and then coming here pretending? I stood up. I'm not feeling well, I'll go rest first. I looked at the untouched food on the table. Jason pursed his lips. I'll take you inside, meaning he still had to go out. No need, I brushed off his help and went inside myself. With the last beam of light, accompanied by the sound of the door closing, darkness engulfed us. Leaning against the door, I took a deep breath, and the 5 years of light and shadow with Jason flashed before my eyes. When I had menstrual cramps, he ran out in the rain to buy medicine for me. The year the car fell into the river, Jason carried me on his shoulder, telling me not to worry about him and to grab the lifebuoy. When I had a high fever, he took me to 3 hospitals, staying up all night without closing his eyes. I didn't want to believe he would fall in love with someone else, just like I couldn't understand why someone could love me with all his heart back then. It took me 3 years to convince myself I was a lucky person. Then, it took another 2 years to uproot this belief from the depths of my heart. I stood behind the door, and the poor soundproofing allowed me to hear the conversation outside. Christina's voice was very low, almost inaudible. You should think carefully about our plans going forward. Jason fell silent for a long time. I knew. Reluctant? Christina chuckled softly, just this once, things will get better in the future. Christina left, and only a dim light remained in the living room. Jason sat in a chair with his back to me, half of his face bathed in moonlight, looking distant and cold. I stood at the bedroom door, holding the report sheet in my hand, and walked up to Jason. He seemed a bit tired, blinked when he saw me. You didn't eat much tonight. I sat down in the chair across from him. I want noodles. Okay, I'll make some. Jason stood up and started tidying up. Amidst the cold leftovers was the untouched little cake. He cleared everything, except for the cake, which he brought in front of me. Bonnie, I haven't wished you a happy birthday yet. He bent down, lifted my hair, and planted a kiss on my forehead. This was his way of comforting me whenever he messed up. I could see the guilt in his eyes, more painful than anything else. I tilted my head back, my voice hoarse. Jason, what did you do wrong this time? He hesitated, avoiding my gaze, and focused on lighting the candles. Bonnie, don't overthink it, let's enjoy your birthday tonight. But my birthday was yesterday. I clenched my fists tightly, the report I had intended to show him crumpled into a ball of paper. Where were you yesterday? Jason furrowed his brows slightly, his actions paused, and his eyes turned cold. I was at the office. I stared into his eyes through the flickering candlelight and said slowly, Anthony Street 43, your office, right? A rundown apartment building with a pretty female employee. Jason's face changed, he slammed the cake onto the table, and snapped, enough. Standing up, his eyes turned icy. Bonnie, don't do this again next time. I was stunned because Jason had never yelled at me like that before, so it was my fault? The tears that I had held back for so long finally fell. Trembling, I angrily smashed the cake, shouting hysterically, do I need to apologize for catching you kissing someone else? The red ribbon from the cake limp on the floor. The owner of the cake shop would attach a red ribbon to every cake bought by a female customer. This was the first time I had yelled at Jason like a shrew. Even for buying a cake for me, he had her do it. Shaking with anger, I rambled, what am I? A breeding tool nurtured by you and your original wife? Or just a fool played around with? Jason's face turned ashen, his fists clenched tightly on the edge of the table, his knuckles white. His forehead veins bulged, and just before the argument escalated, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath. Bonnie, it's not what you think, can we not fight, please? I threw the report at his feet. Explain then. It was silent afterward. He picked up the report, the ultrasound images reflected in his eyes, his fingers trembling slightly. Joy? Or fear? I couldn't read his complex gaze. After a long silence, he called out my name, Bonnie. I understand everything now. Jason slowly unfolded the report and placed it on the table. I can't marry you. This sentence was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Not now. Not even in our past lives did Jason ever consider marrying me. What was I expecting? How could things have developed to this point? Did Jason have his reasons? What kind of reason could make him deceive a girl for 5 years? It's over between us. Silently, I put on my clothes, picked up a small suitcase, and stood at the door. Jason, I've suffered enough, let's break up. My best friend Monica came to pick me up in her car. She pushed me into the car first, then glared at Jason before getting in. The wind was a bit strong, and she probably muttered something before starting the car. As the car started, I looked at Jason standing at the doorway, a light shining from behind, casting a long shadow of him. Good riddance. What a scumbag. Monica cursed as she drove off. Jason got smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror, eventually blending into the darkness. Strike while the iron is hot, the longer you wait, the more wrong you'll endure. Monica tried to console me as she drove. How could I not know that? But when you're used to someone's company, suddenly being torn away from it hurts beyond words. My thoughts were chaotic as I leaned against the window and unknowingly fell asleep. In my dream, I went back in time. Jason was driving us along a coastal road. The sun was scorching, and I wore a straw hat, sticking my head out to feel the sea breeze. Jason chuckled, hold on tight, don't fall out. Then, in the next moment, a truck suddenly lost control, crashed into our car, and sent us plunging into the sea. Water filled my nostrils. I couldn't swim, struggling frantically. In a critical moment, Jason pressed against my waist, lifting me out of the water. The waves were rough, and I, a non-swimmer, floundered in the water. A distant fishing boat threw a lifebuoy. Jason guided me towards it. Bonnie, kick off my shoulder, reach for the lifebuoy and wear it. What about you? I wanted to pull him with me. He pushed away my hand. The waves are too strong, we won't make it together. Don't worry about me. The next moment, a wave came crashing down, and Jason disappeared. Jason. I suddenly woke up, realizing I was still lying in my best friend's car, passing through an intersection. Monica casually reminded me, you just broke up with him. It was raining outside, and the days were getting colder since the beginning of autumn. I remembered the day when Jason got swept away by a wave. Later, the fisherman found him clinging to the ladder on the boat, half submerged in water, almost losing strength. Jason had just climbed back up, lying flat on the deck, the bright sunlight shining mercilessly on his pale face. I knelt beside him, crying so hard I almost couldn't breathe. Jason grabbed my neck, pulled me down, and kissed me passionately. He said, Bonnie, I will always love you. A loud honk brought me back to reality. Jason was gone. Only the red brake lights ahead remained, along with the dense autumn rain. Bonnie, everything will pass. I shrank into myself. Next week, we will have to abort the child. The life we had been looking forward to for 4 months needed to be said goodbye to. It was 2 weeks later when I saw Christina again. Monica and I were on our way home from the hospital when we ran into her coming out of the examination room. She had a happy smile on her face, thanking the doctor inside repeatedly. The doctor advised, in the early stages of pregnancy, avoid strenuous exercise and be cautious between spouses. His voice sounded distant. They were having a child. It was quite a coincidence as I had just terminated my own pregnancy. Jason didn't notice me, turning and walking down the stairs. Monica nudged me, Bonnie, you're still not feeling well. Don't stand for too long. Let's go home. I didn't tell my parents about this. They had lived their whole lives in a conventional manner, and having a child out of wedlock would have led to them scolding me for a long time in my past life. I didn't want them to continue scolding me in this life too. Monica's car was parked in the hospital's rear parking lot. We passed through an outdoor passageway, and I came across Jason. It was late autumn, and he was standing in the draft, wrapped in a black windbreaker. It seemed like the one I had bought for him last year. He stood tall, leaning against the outer wall, eyes cast down like a husband waiting for his wife's pregnancy checkup. By the time I thought of leaving, he had already seen me and stood up straight in an instant. The wind made the report flutter in his hand. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Monica clicked her tongue and said, "Let's just ignore him." "Bonnie," Frank hesitated, his black eyes fixed on me, his face pale. I stuffed the report into his coat pocket, raised my reddened eyes, and said, "I aborted the child." Jason was stunned for a moment, then slowly took the report out of his coat, looked down, and opened it. After a long silence, he hadn't said a word. Was he feeling sorry? The wind was getting colder, so I tightened my coat and brushed past him. Behind me, I heard him say in a stiff voice, "Bonnie, let's not keep in touch in the future." My steps didn't stop, but tears streamed down my face. "Jason, why are you here?" "It's too cold." "Where's the car?" Christina appeared out of nowhere, talking to herself, then abruptly stopped. Maybe she saw my back. "Let's go," it was Jason's voice. I quickened my pace and got into Monica's car. Monica cursed loudly, "What's wrong with that guy?" I looked back to the end of the passageway, but there was no figure there. After the abortion, I had little appetite. I had a mouthful of hot porridge for dinner and loosely wrapped my stomach. Monica spent the whole afternoon talking on the balcony with her brother on the phone. When she came back, her expression was somewhat serious. "Are you sure Jason graduated from the School of Finance and Economics?" I slowly swallowed the last bite and replied, "Yes." My brother said, "There's no one named Jason in their graduating class." Monica grumbled, "You've been deceived." A bitter taste spread from my tongue and filled my mouth. Monica managed to get the graduation photos. I went through hundreds of them, but Jason was not in any. I was completely deceived by him. Should I report him to the police? Monica's eyes were red. This is already considered fraud. That night, I called my mom. "Dad, did you have a previous wife?" There was silence on the other end for a long time, then a cold and distant tone, "Bonnie, if you want what's best for our family, don't ask." I was engulfed in confusion, sitting in the darkness, unable to see anything clearly. Confirming that Jason had deceived me didn't really matter much. I just felt unwilling to accept it. After aborting the child, I stayed at home for a month. By the time I regained my strength, winter had arrived. Winter was damp and cold, with the moisture penetrating to the bones along with the wind. Wrapped in a thick scarf, I sat by the window, listening to the teacher's chalk squeaking on the blackboard. I was preparing for the college entrance exam. Monica suggested that if I couldn't move on, should focus on studying. In November, the nights were getting dark early. Through the window glass, I could see my reflection. It had been 3 days since I last thought about Jason. He didn't even appear in my dreams. At the beginning, it was tough. Every night, I would dream of the moments with Jason we had shared. The first time he took me skiing. The first time we went undercover together. The first time he handed me the lifebuoy and told me to live. For 5 years, countless times, he instilled in me the importance of living well. He must have said it 1,000 times. In case of danger, run for your life. Monica was about to delete our chat history. Just before she pressed the delete key, I burst into tears. "Monica, I can't get over this." As Monica said, all betrayals or lack of love can be traced. But in this past, Jason has always loved me from beginning to end. I can't figure it out. She can't figure it out either. Luckily, not understanding it won't kill you. The workload is heavy, and I often burn the midnight oil. I want to go somewhere outside this city, to meet people from all over the world. In the early hours of a day at the end of November, I suddenly received a series of unfamiliar phone numbers. My phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat, and I answered it. No one spoke. I clicked my pen. Jason? There was a howling wind on the other end, and then it hung up quickly. I knew it was him. I stared at the darkening screen of my phone, lost in thought for a long time. Monica was sprawled behind me, sleeping soundly, mumbling as she turned over. I tried calling back, but the phone was already off. The electronic calendar on the table turned to November 29th. It was supposed to be our wedding date. Time flies. It's been 3 months since we broke up. Although detaching from a relationship is difficult, fortunately, everything is moving in the right direction. I am working hard. The next day was a day off. Monica dragged me to the garden hall for a visit, as she is getting married next month and wanted to check out the venue. The garden hall. It seems like it's been a long time since I thought about this place. In a previous life, I was abandoned by Frank here, 4 months pregnant, with nowhere to hide from the mocking eyes of the crowd. I have to say, the garden hall is a favorite place for young couples. Outdoors, with a Western style. In summer, it's full of flowers, and in winter, it's pots of flowers brought in from the greenhouse. Romantic and stylish. Monica was trying to book a date with the venue manager. The manager shook her head. Sorry, we're fully booked, ma'am, there's no way to move it up. Monica pointed at the empty venue, dissatisfied. There's no one here today, don't overcharge me for nothing. The manager awkwardly explained, someone did reserve it today. Ridiculous, it's already 10 o'clock, where are the people? I don't know. I sat under the flower arch, wrapped in my down jacket, staring blankly at the venue. In the past, to secure this day, Frank and I had put down a deposit ahead of another couple as soon as we found out I was pregnant. At that time, the wedding company specially arranged the wedding venue according to my preferences, but now it seems like a commercial template. After all, the scene in front of me is just like how it was originally. There's no integrity. I exhaled a pale, hot breath, rubbed my hands. The assistant was whispering to the manager, Mr. Jason said there's no bride today, he's coming alone. I slowly stopped, looking at the person who spoke. Jason? I left, Bonnie, let's go to another place. Monica came over to pull me, clearly frustrated that they couldn't come to an agreement. The manager and the assistant were still arguing, with the manager complaining, what's the point of having the venue empty without a bride? Marrying yourself? I stood up heavily, and Monica pulled me a few steps, then suddenly stopped. I'll sit here for a while, why don't you go first? Aren't you feeling well? Monica looked worried. I'll take you home first. No, I smiled, there's someone I know over there. I'll say hello. Monica nodded, contact me later. The manager grumbled as he walked away, and I sat down in an inconspicuous corner, holding my hands like a stunned detective, staring unblinkingly at the outdoor wedding hall in the distance. Half an hour later, I saw Jason. He was a bit thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. Wearing a suit and tie, with a boutonniere on his neck. My mind exploded. I stood up and walked slowly towards him. He was wearing the clothes I designed in a previous life. The collar, it was the same. Standing at the end of the corridor, looking into the distance. Like a belated groom. In that moment, I faintly saw myself, holding up the phone, standing in his sight, calling out Jason's name. The two scenes merged. Frank took out the ring and held it up. Bonnie, will you marry me? The wind suddenly subsided. A sharp pain suddenly drilled out of my heart, hitting my chest, becoming more and more intense. I stood behind Jason, watching him mutter to himself into the air. He still didn't notice me, holding the ring, looking confused. What is he waiting for? Is he waiting for me? Jason held it up for a while, then finally lowered his head, sighing. I wanted to put it on for you myself, but in the end, I never did. You must have been very sad carrying the 4-month-old baby. I suddenly grabbed a decorative vine, shaking all over. Was Frank also reincarnated? Or has he died once before? The cold air rushed into my nose, and I felt like I had fallen into an ice cellar, listening to his trembling voice. I'm sorry, Bonnie, He cried, wiped a tear, took 2 steps, opened his mouth, and the next moment, a phone ringtone came from Jason's suit pocket. He answered the call, rubbed his face, his voice hoarse. Okay, I'll be right back. It felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over me, tightening from my throat, gradually squeezing to my chest. Finally, watching him carefully put the ring into his chest gently, turn around and leave, not saying a word. I came out of the garden hall, bumping into several people on the way. They cursed a few words casually. Watch where you're going. Working hours peak, crowded with cars. The traffic lights were dazzling, car horns piercing, gradually blending into a surreal mix in my senses, leaving only the ringing in my ears. On the large screen at the intersection, a news report was rolling. I blankly looked up, the news printed in my eyes. A vicious attack on the police occurred in the city, and 3 officers died in the line of duty. One was a square-faced old man, one was a tall black man, and one was a young guy. Their names were also mentioned: Sam, Frank, and David. I stared at it for a while, then slumped to the ground at the roadside, unable to hear anything. Before the wedding in the previous life, on this day, when Jason came home, there were many photos on the table. Bonnie sat on the blanket on the coffee table, blinked her eyes. Look, there are lots of your photos here, yet you always say you have no friends. Jason hung his wool coat on the rack by the door, took off his tie, and sat down beside Bonnie, embracing her. These are all from before, nothing interesting to look at. Bonnie lay comfortably in Jason's arms. Why don't you ever cherish old memories? She pulled out a photo. Who are these 2 uncles and the young boy? Jason fell silent. They were brothers who started their business together. Bonnie pretended to sigh sadly, saying that business people are all about profit. Can't they make it work without tearing each other apart, even their brotherhood? Jason chuckled and explained that their paths were different. If they mixed a few companies together and he ran into trouble, he would have to involve them. Bonnie found his excuse oddly amusing, asking if he was in the mafia. Was he cutting off ties now? It would be best if they didn't associate. She couldn't understand Jason's logic and expressed her disbelief in him, wondering if by giving up on being brothers, he thought his girlfriend wouldn't be dragged into trouble. Jason's expression tightened, reassured her that it wouldn't happen. Bonnie sat on his lap, hugged his neck, and playfully asked if he really loved her that much. Blushing, Jason gazed at Bonnie lovingly, reassuring her that he would never drag her down. Bonnie had a sudden thought and leaned in close, teasingly asking what if I really were unlucky? After thinking for a moment, Jason replied that then they wouldn't associate anymore, leading to Bonnie getting angrier than ever before. She twisted Jason's arm, calling him stubborn and questioning if it was necessary to cut ties with her over such a trivial matter. Jason tried to kiss her, but Bonnie evaded him, continuing to scold him. Even if you cut ties, I'll still stick to you. Unless you really don't love me anymore. Amused by her antics, Jason asked if just saying that would suffice. Bonnie pinched his ear in frustration, unable to understand how he could be so loving when his eyes were filled with love. As Jason fell silent, his gaze fixed on a photo of the 4 of them: Jason, Sam, Frank, and David, who was still in college. Monica brought me back from the traffic police. I was sitting on the roadside, motionless, for what seemed like half an hour during the changing traffic lights. Monica apologized to the traffic police and then got into the car. She asked me what was wrong, whether Jason was bothering me again. With mud marks on my face and feeling exhausted, I leaned against the car window and asked her if she knew anyone from the police academy. She did and inquired why. Help me find out about Jason, I replied, my face drained of color. Monica, realizing something was wrong, promised to help. Later, Monica's cousin called me, knowing the special relationship between Jason and me. His first words were, "Stop asking." I clenched my phone, feeling a headache coming on. Should I ask or should I stop? Monica's cousin's final words were, "They know about you, let me pass on, stop asking." My chest felt empty. Despite recently arguing with Jason, I couldn't remember the details clearly. Memories from a past life suddenly became vivid. The phrase "I will never drag Bonnie down" tore open a wound in my heart and poured salt on it. I had been torn apart between reality and intuition until this moment when I finally found the answer, the secret hidden behind Jason. If I were really unlucky, we wouldn't associate anymore. Some things became clearer to me. In a past life, Jason died on his way to a wedding. He had come back. Knowing the outcome, he didn't hesitate this time. "Bonnie, I feel you've changed," he expressed. Monica nodded thoughtfully, propping her head on her hands on the table with a glass of cold milk in front of her. Since that phone call, I had become unusually calm. Often, I found myself lost in thought, staring out the window or absent-mindedly tapping a spoon. Unmoving Monica, "I think I should move out soon," I said. Perplexed, she asked if there was something wrong with our home or if Jason and I had reconciled again. "Don't worry, I just want to focus on my studies," I assured her. After taking a sip of cold milk, I smiled, explaining that I had a heavy study load lately, and would probably be out of touch for some time. I asked her to take care of my parents during my absence, to which she waved her hand, predicting that studying for a master's degree would aggravate Jason. Not long after, I moved into a 50-square-meter apartment, just enough space for one person. I bought my own kitchenware and set up the place just like when I used to live with Jason. I enjoyed watching people from the window and would sometimes open the chat box of my conversations with Jason late at night and stare at it. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. A week passed quietly. Time seemed to stand still. Eventually, I found myself walking into the police station one Wednesday afternoon, nearing closing time. A young police officer welcomed me. "Are you facing any difficulties?" he inquired. I lowered my head and wrote a series of license plate numbers on a piece of paper, asking him to look into it. "What's going on?" He took the paper, glanced at it, and asked if it was a hit-and-run case. I sat in front of him, hands clenched, admitting that I didn't know. It could be a repeat offender, a drug dealer, or it could be nothing at all. In a past life, I was facing an oncoming truck that had crashed through a guardrail and was heading straight towards me before my dad's attempts to dodge it were in vain. It felt like the truck was coming straight for me. The police officer seemed to regard me as mentally unstable, giving me a scrutinizing look before cautioning me about the consequences of making false reports. I nodded and thanked him. After a while, a few more officers arrived and asked me to come with them. In just a few months, I found myself face to face with Christina once again. She looked a bit more pregnant than before, pouring me a cup of hot water, then sat across from me. "Where did you get this license plate from?" I couldn't say. Taking the object from me, Christina assured me that she understood without me saying anything. She hinted that it was time to leave. I sat there, motionless. "You and Jason have broken up," she stated. Christina advised me to take care of myself, asking if I understood. I smiled faintly, feeling a hint of bitterness in my eyes. "I understand. I won't cause trouble for him. If things change in the future." I didn't finish my sentence, merely looking expectantly at Christina. "I have to come back alive, right?" In that moment of locked gazes, she quickly averted her eyes, taking away my cup of water. "It's getting late, you should go back," she urged. It felt like I was falling into an endless dry well, continuously plummeting downwards. Just before leaving, I gestured towards her belly. Comprehending my unspoken words, Christina's eyes welled up slightly. "It's not his," she whispered. "The child's father, you would have seen him in the news recently." The air in December was getting colder. There were hardly any pedestrians on the street. A few scattered plastic bags, wrapped in rainwater, stuck to the ground, and when vehicles passed over, they were crushed like potato chips. I remembered Jason's favorite potato chips. He liked the tomato flavor because I loved tomatoes, but Jason always complained, saying they had a strange taste. Clearly, his taste was picky. I even joked that our future child should not take after him to make parenting easier. The sky was gloomy. I tilted my head back, opened my mouth, and exhaled towards the sky to hold back the tears that were about to roll down my cheeks. Perhaps because it looked ridiculous, it attracted the mocking laughter of a few kids on the side of the road. I couldn't contact Jason, couldn't call him. Just like when he went to the office, I couldn't visit, so I had to quietly wait. When I had free time, I had to find something to do. So that night, I curled up on the couch and opened the posts I had written before, my daily life with Mr. J. I met Mr. J at the cinema. When we walked out of the cinema, I was so moved by the movie plot that I cried badly, even sneezed with snot spraying onto the neck of the person in front of me. And you guessed it right, that person was Mr. J. It was really embarrassing because that was the first time I sneezed without covering my mouth, not because of bad manners. Mr. J had a look on his face that seemed like he wanted to laugh but couldn't. He took out a pack of tissues. Stop crying, wipe your nose. He was really handsome, much taller than me, wearing a dark brown leather jacket, with scattered black hair. I wiped my nose and stole glances at him a few times. I felt he didn't have a girlfriend. How else could he patiently stand there waiting for me to finish wiping my nose? I was very hesitant, but for the first time ever, I boldly asked for his contact information. Mr. J was really hard to impress at first. Basically, for every 3 things I said, he replied with just one. But I was persistent since I was a child. I kept looking for him every day. Later, Mr. J described my behavior as clingy. I said, "Why are you falling for it?" Mr. J didn't respond. About a week after I started dating Mr. J, we had our first fight. It started because he disappeared for 3 days and didn't reply to my messages. I have always been insecure. Whatever I gained as a child always ended up being taken away. Maybe that's just the way I am. I had difficulties with my ex-boyfriends due to some ridiculous reasons. They always left me for someone else, so I automatically assumed we had broken up when Mr. J disappeared for 3 days. That day, as I was packing my things, he came back. I thought he was crazy. I ignored him. Mr. J went into the kitchen. From the sound of it, he was cooking. I couldn't resist sneaking a glance and noticed he seemed to have been beaten up. Forgive me for not being able to control myself. I was the first to speak. Mr. J explained that he had encountered some trouble. He had just started his business, and it was normal to face some challenges in the beginning. I asked him why he didn't reply to my messages. Mr. J said his phone had been smashed, so he couldn't see the messages. What did he do for a living anyway? It wasn't anything illegal, was it? Mr. J had memorized my phone number. Even if he threw his phone into the Pacific Ocean, he could still contact me. Young people nowadays have it tough, working day and night to build their careers, unable to meet people. A sincere warning to all friends: men like Jason can be found, but being career-oriented is really important. MRJ was a warm-hearted guy with a cold demeanor. I used to not believe in love, but when I truly encountered it, I couldn't help but feel excited. It's complicated. I want to get married, but he doesn't seem to have that intention. I'm sorry for being late in coming online. It's been almost 2 years, right? Our relationship is very stable. Thank you all for your blessings. Time froze a year ago, and there were many people urging me to update with new content. I and Frank had so many memories. After a year, I started updating again. I have already married Jason. It was a surprise, but we did it big. Jason is currently on a business trip, calling me every day to report his safety. I hope he returns soon. The comments section was filled with joy and laughter, while I sat in the darkness, for a moment, feeling like the person in the story. That night, I had a dream. I was on a vast sea with big waves, gentle sea breeze, the bright sunlight shone on me, warm and comforting. I thought I was going to dream of that life-threatening situation again, but when I turned around, I saw Jason standing on the deck, waving at me. I felt embarrassed because I remembered we had broken up. What should I say when speaking for the first time? Well, I had to say something. "Bonnie, I have to go." Jason's words were stuck in my throat. It took me a few minutes to understand what Jason was saying. "Where are you going?" Jason didn't say anything, he just opened his arms, indicating for me to come over for a hug. I was caught off guard and felt something was off, followed by a huge wave of fear. Before I could speak, I started crying. I choked back tears and threw myself into Jason's arms, tearfully saying, "I won't let you go." Jason kissed me, saying tears don't make you pretty, and that I looked the most beautiful when I smiled. I held on to him tightly, saying, "Let me make you smile. If I make you laugh, will you stay?" I cried and laughed, desperately wiping away my tears. "You see, I'm not crying, I'm smiling." "Bonnie," Jason said regretfully, touching my face, "I haven't celebrated your birthday. Now it may be too late, so I want to wish you a happy 100th birthday in advance." "No, don't," I sobbed. "I don't want to turn 100. Jason's mouth moved, and suddenly a tear fell from his eye. "I'm sorry, Bonnie." A drop of blood bloomed from his left shoulder, gradually spreading. Soon after, several blossoms appeared, covering the area, like a forest of begonia flowers. Gradually, my vision began to blur. The salty sea breeze blew in my face, and I clung to everything I could sense like a blindfolded person. He was fading. I let out a cry of despair, holding on to him tighter. Finally, I heard him gently whisper in my ear, "Marry someone else." As dawn approached, I sat in the dark room where drowned people resided, frantically typing on my phone screen. Tears fell drop by drop, blurring the words on the screen. "Just now, Jason called me. He's coming back tomorrow." I had a nightmare, woke up scared. They say dreams and reality are opposites. As the long night passed, everyone was asleep. The only response I received was silence. Until the break of dawn, I mechanically put on my clothes like a puppet and went to the police station. The streetlight is still on. I stood at the door, freezing in the cold wind. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I just waited. Maybe in the next moment, Jason would appear on the street corner. I remembered the day at the garden pavilion, wondering if I could have called out to him and talked to him. Would I have avoided waiting for so long? I took out my phone, scrolled through posts on how to get back an ex-boyfriend. The first step was to send a text message. But I was too scared to send it. I typed out a message, "What are you doing? I miss you." My finger hovered over the send button, but I didn't press it. I decided to wait a bit longer. Jason must be sleeping, so I would send it when it's daylight. Dawn was approaching. As the streetlight went out, a black car turned the corner. The gravel road crunched under the tires. I clenched my phone, watching intently. The car slowly parked in front of the police station, and 4 men got out. In the dim light of dawn, the 4 men walked towards me, their steps synchronized. They were all strangers, walking towards me with precision. I tightened my grip, my breath quickened, my lips trembling, hot blood rushing to my ears, on the verge of suffocation. They stopped in front of me and saluted in unison. My phone slipped from my hand with a snap, the screen shattering. That message was never sent. In the early morning of December 13, 2021, it was the coldest moment of that winter. I knelt on the frost-covered ground, crying uncontrollably. Jason, he was gone from me. There was no name on Jason's tombstone. It snowed on the day of the memorial service. I walked from the front gate, through the muddy ground, my boots stained beyond recognition. I cried continuously, as if all the tears of my life had dried up. After the memorial service ended, Christina stopped me. "He had no family, but there are things I think should belong to you." Christina, pregnant again, struggled to open the trunk, revealing a collection of things Jason had hidden related to me. He had hidden them well. Those people never found them on you. Christina brought out the sorted items, returning them to the rightful owner. My voice was hoarse. I mumbled a thank you, taking the items. Then Christina searched her pocket and pulled out a wedding ring found on him. It was the ring he held in his hand the last time I saw Jason. I took out the ring and put it on my ring finger. It fit perfectly. Christina hesitated. You could find someone else. I shook my hand. I'm already married. I won't look. She sighed. Actually, I think he was quite ruthless. These past few months, he seemed desperate to cut all ties with you sometimes. I hesitated, wondering if he didn't do it because he knew that otherwise, you might have died. I stood in the cold wind, silent. Jason, do you know something? Christina furrowed her brow. About the license plate number you gave last time, it was correct. Without you, we might have lost more people. And the first time we went on a mission together, pretending to be a couple, how did you coincidentally show up there? If you knew, you must tell me. Do you believe in rebirth? I interrupted her. Christina hesitated, clearly not believing. I continued. At first, I thought having another chance was a gift from God. I guess that's how Jason felt too, but I did it for myself, and he did it for me. Christina, I've never felt so despicable. Why do memories become so clear at some point? The day we terminated the pregnancy, Jason seemed to cry. And the day before our wedding, he called me. The next day, he stood at the wedding venue, professing his love to thin air. If only I had stood up and stopped him at that moment, maybe he wouldn't have died. But I was too afraid. I figured out what kind of person he was, and I was scared of ruining his plan. I kept thinking, there would be another chance in the future. I actually hoped for a minute that we could talk things out and be together. After all those times, I decided to wait one more time, just one more time. I didn't create a scene, nor did I call Jason. I thought he would be fine. He could definitely win over others with a fresh start, right? Christina, just now when I stood in front of his gravestone, I couldn't figure out what to do to change this outcome. If death could change everything, I decided to give it a try. Christina patted my shoulder, her gaze serious. It's not your fault. Jason said he was most afraid of you feeling guilty. There are things he chose not to let you know, so you can't know. Bonnie, try to accept it. In a few days, I'll take you to see a therapist. You need treatment. The crack in my mind that had just opened suddenly closed. I felt more clear-headed. Yes, Jason was gone, and in this world, there would be no one to understand me anymore. Okay, I touched the ring. I also wanted to know, when he left. Christina swallowed hard and said, he looked peaceful, didn't suffer. She hurriedly lowered her gaze. I have to go now. I held a box of Jason's belongings, staring blankly in the direction she left, my eyes swollen, unable to shed another tear. Turning around, my parents were standing outside with an umbrella, waiting for me. My dad held a bouquet of flowers, placing them next to Jason's grave. Now you have someone to accompany you, Mary. Mary's tombstone didn't have a name either. My mom stood behind, rubbing her tearful eyes. Mary, I'm sorry, now I know he was your son. She must be Dad's ex-wife. Jason was the child she brought. The sky darkened, and the first snow of winter finally fell on Earth. At that moment, looking up at the swirling snowflakes, I suddenly remembered last winter's first snow, when Jason stood downstairs making a snowman for me. Did he make 3 of them? Jason affirmed, 2 big ones and 1 small one. I blushed, chasing after him. Jason, you have no shame. I pinched his ear, making him beg for mercy. All right, I won't say it anymore, I'll do as you say. I squatted in front of Jason's grave, molding 3 miniature snowmen. 2 big ones and 1 small one. I pointed at the 3 of them. Jason, look, you, me, and him. Outside the gate, my parents were waiting. Bonnie, it's time to go. I wiped away my tears, touched the gravestone again. I can't keep coming here all the time. Don't worry, I will keep you in my heart. Jason's epilogue. When did I know Bonnie was also reborn? It was probably when she hid the pregnancy test in the trash can while cowering in a corner. I was always worried she would be retaliated against, so, after lurking for many years and achieving great success, I decided to marry her. But things didn't just magically become peaceful after a bunch of people died. There were still survivors who came after Bonnie and me. I died on the way to our wedding. A steel bar pierced through me, pinning me to the car. I was just 1 kilometer away from the wedding venue. As I died, I didn't even dare to look in Bonnie's direction, fearing they would smell the scent and find Bonnie waiting at the wedding venue. I always thought that being reborn once was a gift from God. He used the inevitable ending to remind me to think of a way out for Bonnie sooner. When I was reborn, I stood outside the bathroom door. The day was still fresh in my memory because a few minutes later, Bonnie would come out excitedly and tell me she was pregnant. In those few minutes, I prepared to say goodbye to Bonnie, even thinking of persuading her to have an abortion. Those words would sting her like a knife, just like in the past life. She would get upset even if I hesitated for a moment. Now, would she get angry if I suggested an abortion? 3 minutes felt like an eternity, but passed in a flash. It was eerily silent inside. What's wrong? Suddenly, I had a bad feeling. I pushed the door and saw Bonnie huddled in a corner. In that moment our eyes met, and I saw the shattered sense of despair. My heart tightened, and I felt a chill down my spine. They found Bonnie. I had protected Bonnie so well that no one, not even if they cut open my body, could find Bonnie's whereabouts. Yet, Bonnie still died. She was reborn in a tiny bathroom, like an abandoned child, hiding the pregnancy test in the trash can, ready to face everything on her own. Why did it have to be this way? I couldn't understand. But there was another path we could take, hopefully not too late. Bonnie remained motionless. I wanted to hug her, but I held back. I couldn't give her any hope. The walls built with despair would become the things protecting her. I couldn't bear it either. Bonnie's 24th birthday was around the corner. In the past life, due to a special mission, I missed her birthday. Later, she was mad at me for about a week, not speaking to me. Our time together was running out, and I didn't want that to happen again this time. So, when the mission was over, I told Christina, yesterday was Bonnie's birthday. Then let's have a celebration, Christina said as she took off her makeup and wrapped herself in the leather coat Frank gave her. There's a nice cake shop around, it tastes good. Last time I had a birthday, Frank got the cake from there. Christina was preparing to have a baby soon, so she was planning to move to a relatively safer position. I hesitated for a moment and said, let me introduce you to Bonnie. I'll count on you to take care of her in the future. Christina glanced at me and chuckled, you know, saying that isn't a good omen, right? It sounds like you're giving final instructions. That day, Bonnie wasn't home. I knew she went to the hospital. Every day waiting for her to have an abortion was torturous. It felt like having a sword hanging over my head, knowing it would eventually drop, just not knowing when. In the evening, Bonnie was in a bad mood. She didn't want to see me. In a way, that was for the best, so she could just kick me out and leave gracefully. But the thought of that made me feel like I was drowning, unable to breathe. Christina looked at the cake and asked, did the boss tie it up with a ribbon for you? Why not? He only does it for female customers. I realized I had hurried too much to notice, so the boss didn't have time to make a new one and sold me a leftover cake. Christina gave me an annoyed look. Men never understand what women care about. You need to seriously consider our next plan. She was referring to the final operation, very dangerous. A small mistake could jeopardize everything in the past life. Even after capturing them all in one fell swoop, I still faced terrible repercussions. This time, I had more clues in my hands. I knew. Drinking felt bitter and sour in my mouth as I gestured towards the closed bedroom door, sighing. Reluctant? Christina chuckled, just this time, things will get better from now on. Christina left, her mood wasn't great today. Heard that Frank got injured recently. Colleagues always teased the two of them, a drug officer and a detective, the power couple of the entire police force. I was contemplating the next steps, when the bedroom door opened and Bonnie walked out. She hadn't eaten much tonight. Every time I saw her, she seemed to be in pain. Perhaps, girls are just sensitive when facing an impending farewell. I wanted to celebrate her last birthday. Before I could even give my blessings, I thought of wishing her to live until 100 years. But before I could light the candles, Bonnie exploded. She had followed me. It was the first time I saw Bonnie get angry. She knew that just because of my colleague's son called him dad on the street, it caused chaos at home. I solemnly warned her not to do this again. Bonnie smashed the cake, yelling at me loudly. It's not her fault. From a normal person's perspective, such behavior is undoubtedly a standout in the scumbag world. When things got so messed up that they couldn't be salvaged, I actually thought seriously, what else needed to be salvaged? Tell her the truth and let Bonnie take our 4-month-old child and go die together? I slowly spread out the report card, placed it on the table, and said, I can't marry you. In fact, I knew every word on the report card by heart. I had flipped through it countless times in the middle of the night, and with my eyes closed, I could imagine what our child would look like. Bonnie was hurt to the core. She stood at the door with a suitcase. Jason, I've suffered enough. It's over between us. After she left, I sat on the steps in front of the building and lit a cigarette. The sharp taste filled my lungs, making me feel much better. I'm confident that Bonnie will be fine. Back when my mother married Bonnie's father, they were deeply in love. However, my mother died in the line of duty, and 3 years later, Bonnie's father ended up with someone else, and that's how Bonnie came to be. There was definitely a resentment in my heart before. I wanted to see why someone who clearly loved my mother would end up with someone else and have their child. I saw their family of 3 living peacefully downstairs in the neighborhood. That's when I understood that people always walk towards the light. I did. Bonnie's father did. And future Bonnie will too. I followed Bonnie for 2 weeks. Finally, the day came when she had to go to the hospital. I heard from Christina that a miscarriage is very harmful to the body, and I was worried. I walked back and forth outside the hospital. When we were at the antenatal checkups, she teased me about being so anxious now. She said, if you're so anxious now, how will you handle it when I go in to have the baby in the future? You might be scared to death then, right? I wore the jacket Bonnie bought me and still smelled of the laundry detergent she bought. I waited for several days, and she was hospitalized. Waiting made my heart race. I heard that there are risks with a miscarriage. What if something happened to Bonnie? Later, I saw Bonnie. Her face was very pale, devoid of any color. She looked thin, as if she could be blown away by the wind. Bonnie walked over, handed me the report, and choked, I've lost the baby. That feeling was like someone was cutting me with a knife all over my body. I clenched the paper, hung my head, and eventually couldn't hold back the tears. I told her not to contact me anymore. Bonnie didn't pause for a moment, just walked away, not looking back. Christina and Frank finally had a child. Excited, Christina came over to talk to me. Suppressing my emotions, I walked away. As I turned the corner, I waited until Bonnie was helped into the car before turning. Meeting Christina's cold gaze, I asked her if she was insane. Was it necessary to treat her like this? Did I have any other choice? I asked. I couldn't say a word about what we had done. Should I tell her that I had cancer? Christina moved her lips weakly, unable to retort. Cancer is better than torturing her like this. She's only 24, I said weakly. If I don't let her give up, how will she live with a fatherless child for the rest of her life? Christina fell silent. She never wanted to mention death. Neither did I. But when I truly faced an unexpected death, in that last moment with my eyes open, I realized that not really knowing Bonnie was my greatest wish. Soon, it was the end of November. Lately, I've been dreaming of Bonnie. Dreaming that she got married, with a happy and complete family. Maybe it's because of the cold weather, always dreaming of something, just to ward off the cold winter. That night, I saw a Canterbury bell by the window. It was bought on a whim passing by a florist, to be kept in the greenhouse when the weather is cold. But no matter how well you take care of it, it's hard to keep it alive. Tomorrow was the day we were supposed to get married. I booked the venue in the same place, used Bonnie's design, and bought the ring she liked. I really wanted to marry her. If that day hadn't ended in an accident, she would have been my wife by now. We would have had a 4-month-old child. I called Bonnie. On the other end of the line, there came a hoarse voice, "Jason?" I listened quietly to her breathing, then hung up the phone. November 29th. I went to the wedding venue. It was my first time wearing a formal suit. Walking down the corridor towards the end, he had never seen Bonnie in a wedding dress. She said she wanted to surprise me. So now, I had to rely on my imagination. I kept the ring box in my pocket and it had warmed up. I had been with Bonnie for 5 years, and in the end, I couldn't even put the ring on her. It's really a bit regretful. I wanted to say a few more words, but then I suddenly received a phone call. Just now, Frank was dead. It was said that they laid hands on Frank and his brothers directly to lure Christina out to take revenge. Plans have changed, it needs to be done earlier. Before leaving, I seemed to hear Bonnie crying, yet it felt like an illusion. This time, I might not come back. November 30th. Illegal drug dealings. The drug dealers were tougher than we expected. They had me try the drugs. I tried them, convulsing all over, foaming at the mouth. What I feared the most was the next day. They let their guard down, and the plan proceeded smoothly. December 2nd. Something's not right. I was exposed. It was absurd that ancient torture methods could reappear in modern times. December 4th. I had nothing to confess. They tortured me, repeatedly asking where my family and colleagues were. I said not a word. Especially about Bonnie. She was probably still studying hard. Bonnie, I still want to see you pursue your postgraduate studies. December 6th. I might be close to death. Blood was everywhere, I was shaking all over, devoid of warmth. Bonnie, wear something warm, my blood is probably drying up, and it's related to the weather. In the evening, when they were watching TV, I heard it was going to rain tomorrow. Remember to bring an umbrella. December 9th. The guy across from me played with a knife, cursing, "This guy's mouth is tough, we should just kill him." I stared at him, and saw him approaching with the knife. Bonnie, on December 12th, I had gone blind, couldn't see anything. But oddly, I could see Bonnie's face all the time. It was annoying. I had to leave, but before that, I said goodbye to Bonnie. "Come over, let's hug," I said. Bonnie rushed over, tears in her voice. "I won't let you leave. Crying doesn't look good on you, Bonnie, you are the most beautiful when you smile. So, if I smile, will you not leave?" She said. "Look, I'm not crying, I'm smiling." "Bonnie," I regretfully touched my face, "it's my birthday, I haven't celebrated with you, and now it's probably too late. I want to wish you a happy 100th birthday in advance." I really wanted to tell her that, "I'm sorry, Bonnie, I am a police officer." Unfortunately, she couldn't hear it. I also hoped she would never hear it and just be an ordinary person, obediently. I'm not afraid of death, I just fear Bonnie's life without me. I hugged her, touched her head for the last time and said, "Marry someone else." December 13th. Colleagues came. They pushed me up and pointed a gun at me. The sea breeze was salty, and the sound of the shot came in the last moment. I seemed to see the azure sky, as clean as Bonnie's skirt. 40 years later, Vera works as a caregiver in a nursing home. She worked hard to get in here after graduation, and within just half a month on the job, she had all the rules and regulations down pat. The director mentioned that all the residents here were elderly people who had lost their only child. If someone doesn't have any children, the relevant departments will send them here to ensure they can spend their later years in peace. Among them, there was one grandmother who needed special attention. She had depression, which was said to be due to losing her husband when she was young and also having had a miscarriage. Having lived for over 40 years, she refused to remarry. When the authorities brought her in, they gave her the name Bonnie, but it was best not to ask too many questions about a person's background. One day, Vera knocked on Bonnie's door and softly said, "Bonnie, are you up?" The door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman in a wheelchair sitting quietly at the doorway, her eyes dark and deep, hidden behind wrinkled skin as if they had seen many hardships. Bonnie's room was filled with many flowers and plants, and she would smile and chat with people, showing no signs of her depression. Vera also noticed the rings on her fingers, which may look outdated now but must have been quite fashionable back in the day and likely costly. Bonnie made room for Vera to enter, and Vera was careful, not daring to meet Bonnie's gaze directly when speaking. This was because Bonnie had recently been diagnosed with a brain tumor. Even after the surgery, it was likely to come back quickly, causing her memory to deteriorate. With no children to sign for her, Bonnie, while in her right mind a few years back, had personally signed a DNR and no treatment agreement. Vera vividly remembered the look on the director's face when conveying this information. Bonnie was suffering even though she was still alive. Typically, without proper treatment, depression would worsen, but Bonnie had managed to live well. Vera couldn't understand why. She herself had once been in a 5-year relationship that ended due to differences in life plans after graduation. Long-lasting love was like an ancient myth, something that didn't exist. While packing up, Vera found an old cell phone in a drawer that barely functioned these days. Opening few websites from over 40 years ago, she knew it was wrong to invade Bonnie's privacy. But as the screen lit up accidentally, she saw a message. "This month, my grandchildren came to visit me. My memory is fading. Mr. J and I live in the nursing home, and he takes me to see the sea every day. We've been watching the sea for 40 years. The latest memory was just a few minutes ago. Today I dressed up nicely to meet Mr. J." Vera had a strange feeling, and when she turned around, the room was empty. She broke into a cold sweat. The first rule stated, "Never let the person under your care out of sight." Vera rushed out, flustered, to inform her colleagues. The incident alarmed the director. Urgently checking the surveillance footage revealed that Bonnie had wheeled herself out of the back door and was heading towards the vast sea behind the nursing home on a rocky path. There were steep cliffs there. Everyone hurried outside. By then, half an hour had passed since Bonnie left. The director was already drafting her resignation letter in her mind, but thankfully, since Bonnie had no relatives, there would be no claim for compensation. At the end of June, the warmth of summer had not yet fully enveloped the coastline. A cool breeze blew in from the sea, with the sun shining brightly, creating a beautiful day. Vera was in the front, and on the bare cliff, a small wheelchair stood at the edge, facing the sea. Bonnie sat quietly inside, her old pearl earrings sparkling in the sunlight. She was dressed brightly, reminiscent of the fashion from decades ago. Her thin arms poked out from the bell sleeves, resting gracefully in front. Vera breathed a sigh of relief, jogging over to Bonnie. "Bonnie, you have to tell me before going out from now on." As she approached, she noticed Bonnie was still staring ahead, ignoring her. While Bonnie had slowed responses due to her condition, she would usually respond to her name being called. Vera slowly stopped in her tracks and, at that moment, looking at the endless coastline, she felt like crying. She gently placed her hand on Bonnie's shoulder. The body was already cold. Vera had seen many elderly people pass away. On a beautiful morning facing the sea, Bonnie peacefully left this world. At 64, she passed away from cancer. The director and others followed close behind, stopping as if sensing something. The director suddenly recalled the day Bonnie arrived and asked her younger self, who had just started the job 3 years ago, "Today is International Day Against Drug Abuse. Can we put up the banners?" Bonnie's epilogue: in the months after Jason's death, Christina dragged me down from the top floor. She yelled, "Are you out of your mind? You're dead. How can I explain this to Jason?" Sitting on the ground, I said, "He visited me before he died." Christina said, "Thoughts by day, dreams by night. He's gone, look forward and live well." Ignoring her, I continued, "He was on the deck, his left hand injured. Christina burst into tears with just those words. I knew I was right. When I saw Jason, all I had was an urn. Perhaps they couldn't even find a complete body for him. That day, Jason really came to bid me farewell. Feeling calm, I said to her, Christina, do you believe in souls? She choked up, I hope so. Because my husband also died this year. She said, I have a purpose, so I can't die. Bonnie, you need to find your purpose, I need to find mine. There's more to life than death, something more meaningful. Since then, I dismissed thoughts of death and joined an advocacy group. It's been 30 years already. Jason must be watching me. I can't let his efforts go to waste. My parents kept urging me to get married, even trying to take the ring off my hand. In the argument, I hit my head and bled profusely. My dad yelled angrily, he's gone, the living must continue. Look at you now. I'm healthy, mild-mannered, a law-abiding citizen. I just don't want to love someone else again, is that wrong? I didn't want them to understand me, and they didn't want to understand me. So, my parents continued to push for decades, but as they aged, they couldn't push anymore. Later on, they passed away, and I was left alone in the world. Quietly. I've been updating that article all this time, but fewer people are reading it. Young people like passionate and short-lived love, kind of like us back then. In the article, it's the happy and fulfilled life of me and Jason. Sometimes I look at the ring and keep thinking about that winter when Jason stood at our wedding and said those words to me. The past me waited at the end, and this Jason of this life put the ring on my ring finger. How is this not considered getting married? I lived for over 30 years, and one day, as I went downstairs to buy groceries in the morning, I fell down the stairs, breaking my leg. After the surgery, I couldn't walk anymore. Eventually, they sent me to a nursing home. By the sea. They say people in nursing homes are pitiful and lonely, but I don't feel that way. It's the place closest to Jason for me. As my memory worsened due to brain cancer, Jason's face became clearer and clearer. He often sat beside me, chatting, Bonnie, you're not tending to the flowers properly. They say lazy people can't take care of plants, you'll drown them. I'd retort, people who watch plants shouldn't talk. Sometimes, during meals, when he nagged me, just eat some meat, stop being picky, your health isn't great. If he annoyed me, I'd argue with him. Occasionally, when I was clear-headed, I'd understand that those were just memories of our life together. I'm 64 this year. Since Jason's death when I was 24, I've been striving to live for 40 years. I've done many meaningful things. Early this morning, my mind was clear for a long time. The sea breeze blew in from the window, and I missed him a bit. Vera, with her back to me, was packing things up. I wanted to go see the sea. I went through the gravel path, pushing the wheelchair, sweating when I finally reached the mountaintop. The sun was warm and bright. The vast blue sea lay ahead. I opened my mouth and called out a name I hadn't said in over 40 years, Jason. He appeared, looking young, with scattered black hair, gentle eyes, and a smile that held only me in them. Bonnie, come here. He held my frail hand, crouching in front of the wheelchair, arms wide open. I smiled. Do I look beautiful today? Very beautiful. Suddenly, my body felt light, and I stood up from the wheelchair, my slender pale arm linking with Jason's, the diamond ring on my ring finger shining as bright as ever. I adjusted my wedding dress, put on high heels, and asked him to support me. Okay. Jason looked at me with tender eyes. Seagulls flew by in the distance, and Jason and I intertwined our fingers, like two new people heading towards the warmth of the sun, as if marriage awaited us. Bonnie, let's go home.